Hello everyone, how's it going? And welcome to the patch notes for Wild Rift patch 5.3a and the release of AMBESSA. Now today is the release of AMBESSA, so we only really have a little bit of details from what we've seen on the PBE, but so far AMBESSA looks like such a fun champion to play and such a difficult champion to play against as well. But because this is the first time that we're seeing AMBESSA on both PC League of Legends and Wild Rift, the tier list can change depending on what builds are going to be really good for her, and I'll make sure I keep the website up to date throughout the time that AMBESSA gets released to change the tier list and also change the builds at the same time. Now unfortunately I won't be able to do a video on AMBESSA when she first gets released, because when you're watching this video I'll actually be in Alicante for a TFT event that Riot invited me to, and I'll be back on Tuesday, so expect me to do a stream on Tuesday where I'll be playing AMBESSA probably for the whole day and trying to break down how she works. But anyway, enough of that. Let's get into the tier list. This video is going to be a lot shorter than the previous because in these kind of A/B/C tier patch notes, I only really look at the changes that I made and not every single champion in general. So first up, we have the Baron lane. Not really too much has changed in the Baron lane, to be fair. I still think Mordekaiser is very powerful, even though Mordekaiser did receive a bit of a nerf in the most recent patch. I still think he is in a very, very strong spot. It gives you that AP damage source in the Baron lane, and his ultimate is just way too strong. Being able to isolate a champion, being able to steal their stats as well, is just very, very powerful overall. So I still feel like Mordekaiser is going to be incredibly strong in this patch, and he is going to stay in the S+ tier. AMBESSA, as I mentioned, put her in the S tier for now. I think her kit is going to be very, very annoying to deal with how many dashes she has. She can blink all the way into the backline to AD carries. She has a lot of sustain as well. I do think there are some items that are going to be very good for her. Items like Eclipse, kind of like Riven, because AMBESSA works similarly to Riven, where you want to use an ability and auto attack afterwards. And also her abilities have a very low cooldown, so it means you can proc Eclipse quite easily. Black Cleaver can also be very good. Trinity Force for the Sheen passive, and then kind of standard bruiser items like Death Stance, more of Malmortius, Twin Guard, Sterix Gauge, and even Guardian Angel. So there are a few items there that you can test out. I do have a build on my website, but again, it might change depending on what she comes out, how strong she comes out as, and how many builds get tested across the world. Other than that, nothing else has changed at all in terms of the top lane. Everything else has pretty much stayed the same. Not really any other changes either. I don't have Swain in the top lane, but to be fair, Swain is still pretty bad anyway, but I'll talk about him more in the mid lane. In the jungle, I've moved Wukong up from S tier up to S+ tier. I think Wukong, with how many junglers are currently being nerfed, Wukong is the only really untouched one that got buffed a few patches ago. And the buff was quite big where they buffed his first ability. So he does a crazy amount of burst damage now. So you can even use Conqueror. You can see people going first strike or even phase rush as well. And when you go for this kind of one-shot build with Wukong, or even the sustain build, you'll see how much damage Wukong can deal and also how much survivability he has in a team fight as well. His ultimate is great in a team fight with this huge massive AoE knockup, and as I said, I think he's probably one of the best junglers out there at the moment. Obviously sitting at the top still with the likes of Rengar. Since the rework, he's been very, very strong. Lilio is still very powerful in the jungle, and also Xin Zhao. Another crazy buff we got this patch is the buff to Pantheon. Now Pantheon, you can either go for Electrocute or First Strike, really depends on the enemy team comp that you're playing against. First Strike can be easy to proc, but it really depends on if you're going to be the one that deals damage first, which most of the time is very likely with Pantheon. But if they dodge your ultimate and if they stun you or deal damage to you as soon as you jump with your ultimate, then you're kind of going to be useless. But Pantheon's buffs were absolutely crazy. Buffing his first ability, especially the cooldown and the damage to monsters, was really, really nice. And just overall, his damage has been pretty incredible. So he kind of has that crazy one-shot potential now, which, as you see in the videos can be quite insane. But I don't think he is S+ tier. I think there are still counters to him, and I still think that he could be kited quite easily and CC'd quite easily. So for now, I'm just putting him in the S tier. As for Gragas, did receive a nerf in the most recent patch. He can still be an S+ tier champion. He doesn't have the same amount of burst that he has before, but he still has crazy one-shot potential. So don't be surprised if the Gragas is still going to be in your game, still carrying games, because the champion is still very, very strong. But I just feel like the S+ tier champions are just a little bit above Gragas. I mean, if I had a S++ tier and an S+ tier, Gragas would move up into the S+ tier. But yeah, Gragas still strong. I have moved him down, but he's still a very, very strong champion. The likes of Amumu and Remus is still very strong if you want kind of easy champions in terms of tanks, and then everything else has pretty much stayed the same. Nothing else has really changed. I know some people try and echo out with Fleet Footwork. I still don't think he's really that strong, to be fair. I don't think the damage is actually that crazy, because you're losing out the damage on First Strike and and Electrocute when you're just getting a quicker cast off or a quicker passive cast off with your Fleet Footwork. So in my opinion, First Strike or Electrocute is still better for him. Into the mid lane, Heimerdinger nerf was enough. Honestly, it was not enough. Heimerdinger still one of the best champions out there, still one of the best mid laners as well. His zoning control with his turrets, his crazy amount of damage. I don't think Heimerdinger got nerfed enough. I wouldn't be surprised to see Heimerdinger get nerfed again in the next patch. That's how strong he is at the moment. But of course, we still have Syndra up here as well as a really strong mage. And also Yasuo, just because the build is still very strong. If you want to try and go for the likes of Wit's End into this tank build, even though Wit's End did get nerfed to kind of nerf this build, it's still very strong on Yasuo. Or you can just go for a more carry build of Yasuo, and it still makes him very, very powerful. A few champions moved up to S tier. They got buffed this patch. Galio, even though his damage numbers didn't get buffed, the cooldown buff on every single one of his basic abilities is absolutely crazy. Now, people are saying like, oh, this doesn't improve Galio's damage output that much. It doesn't, but it gives you more possibilities and more opportunities to be able to go in and make plays and use your crazy burst damage. Cooldown reduction sometimes doesn't mean too much, but when it's on every single one of your basic abilities, and that's where you really want to use your big combos with Galio, you can go into a fight, use your burst damage, run away, and then go back in again in just a few seconds. So I think this buff is really, really powerful. And also Veigar, buffing both his first ability and his second ability, two of his main abilities that he's able to scale with. Takedowns now also grants him more passive stacks. Overall, a great champion to play and a reason why he's moved up into the S tier. Still a bit weak during the early game, but still very, very powerful. And also Swain, I mentioned briefly in the barrel lane because I thought I had him in the barrel lane, but I didn't. Swain, still bad in my opinion. The AP ratios got buffed. I don't think it's enough. I just don't really like Swain overall. I think his kit is just not really that good. He can do well if he builds like a tank build, and he can be really annoying to deal with, but overall, just not that strong in my opinion. Heimerdinger as well, just to mention, can also go in the Baron lane. We're probably sitting like S tier. I think mid lane Heimerdinger is probably better, but Heimerdinger in the Baron lane can also do incredibly well. AD carries. Oh, do we have a shift in the AD carry meta this patch? S plus tier hasn't changed. I still think Caitlyn is one of the best AD carries. Her incredible range and everything is just crazy. Varus, with how many different builds you can go, is also very good. The same with Xayah as well. S tier, we have a bit of a change. We have moved down Kai'Sa. Now, Kai'Sa, surprisingly enough, has one of the worst win rates right now in the ADC role. This is because both Terminus and Wit's End got nerfed, in the last patch. So Kai'Sa can't really go for this on-hit build anymore. You can go for the kind of Terminus plus Runa's Hurricane build, but it just doesn't do as much damage as what Wit's End did before. And again, Terminus losing that 5 AD might not seem like a lot, but it's still going to be a lot of damage over time. So Kai'Sa, I've actually moved down from S tier to A tier. And I was tempted. I was this close to moving Miss Fortune from A tier up to S tier. I think the Miss Fortune is in a lot better spot than what she was before. However, she still has her flaws there. She still doesn't really have a lot of mobility. She can still struggle when she uses her ultimate. You really have to position perfect with Miss Fortune and target the right champions to make her work. Also, I might change her rune as well to First Strike, because I've been trying First Strike with Miss Fortune and it's been going pretty damn well. I was tempted to move her up into S tier. Maybe I will, but for now, I'll leave her in A tier and kind of see how the rest of the patch works. Other than that, the rest of the tier list is pretty much the same. Same B tier champions, same A tier champions, and same S tier champions as well. And then moving into the supports, I kind of wanted to move a tank in the S plus tier because I kind of had enchanters up there with Milio and Janna, with Milio and Janna being two of the best enchanters right now in the meta. But I wanted to move Leona up into the S plus tier because I do have a lot of tanks in the S tier, and I wanted to see, you know, I wanted to kind of work out what is the best tanks out of all of them. Now, overall, enchanters are very strong compared to tanks at the moment in the current meta. That has shifted ever so slightly thanks to the addition addition of the Hex Tech Zeke's convergence, which is why Leona's moved up into S+ tier. Leona is one of the best champions that can use the Hex Tech Zeke's convergence, because when you use your ultimate at range, you can stun enemy champions and then dive on in with a Zenith Blade and just get a huge amount of crowd control, which means they're going to be in that circle taking a lot of damage. But overall, there are still some really strong tanks that you can play. The likes of Thresh, Ornn, and Maokai can still be very good, but I still feel like Leona is a step above the rest just because of her playmaking potential and her engage potential that she can get in the early game and also the late game. And then I move Heimerdinger down. Heimerdinger as a support is still good, but you just don't have the amount of gold that you have as a support to be able to get items and get an early lead and being able to carry your team. Whereas if you play Heimerdinger in the mid lane, then you'll be able to get a bunch more gold, get a bunch more experience, and get the items that you need to be able to carry. And again, as for the support tier list, everything else stays the same. But as I mentioned, I just wanted to give you a brief update on the tier list because this is the release of AMBESSA. I do have a build for AMBESSA. It might change, it might not change, I'm not too sure. This is kind of my predicted build in the Baron lane. You can probably play AMBESSA in the jungle as well, play the likes of Ghostblade in the jungle, even Eclipse as well can also be really good in the Baron lane. Again, it's very difficult to kind of predict the build. I'm 99% sure that this is going to be the runes. Conqueror is just going to be the best. Nullifying Orb, Second Wind, Overgrowth is just very good in the Baron lane with Brutal. Maybe this changes for the jungle build. But yeah, as I mentioned, items like Black Cleaver is going to be really good because you can reduce the armor very, very quickly by using all of your abilities. Trinity Force with the empowered auto attack is going to be very nice. Steris Gauge, Death Stance, Twin Guard to also get the defensive stats. But as I mentioned, Eclipse can also be very good. Ghostblade if you're roaming around the jungle. Again, I think AMBESSA is going to be a very, very fun champion to play. Make sure you give her a try. Let me know what you think of AMBESSA if you're watching this on Thursday or even Friday. If you played a few games of AMBESSA, let me know what you think of her down in the comments. And as always, thank you all so much for watching the video. Take care, and I'll see you all in the next one.